Hey explorers, welcome back to Peregrine Pathways. I am so excited to take you on today's adventure because we're going deep inside one of America's most fascinating abandoned asylums. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Haunting asylum sounds spooky, right? But here's the thing. This place tells an absolutely incredible story about hope, ambition, medical history, and the real people whose lives unfolded within these walls. So grab your favorite beverage, get comfortable, and let's explore together. Today, we're visiting the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in Weston, West Virginia. And let me tell you, when I first saw this place, my jaw literally dropped. This isn't just any abandoned building. It's the largest hand-cut stone masonry building in North America. Can you even imagine? Every single stone was quarried and shaped by hand. The building stretches over a quarter mile from end to end, and standing in front of it, you really feel the massive scale of what people built here starting way back in 1858. So here's what makes this place really special. When they designed this asylum, they were actually trying to do something revolutionary for the time. They used this approach called the Kirkbride Plan, which was all about treating people with mental illness humanely. And that was actually a new concept back then. The whole philosophy was about fresh air, natural light, beautiful architecture, and treating patients with dignity. The Gothic Revival style wasn't just for looks. They genuinely believed that beautiful surroundings could help people heal. How amazing is that? Now, here's where the story gets complicated, and it's really important we talk about this. The original design called for 250 patients. Sounds reasonable, right? But at the absolute peak, over 2,400 people were living here. Just imagine trying to provide individualized care when you're dealing with nearly 10 times the number of people the building was designed for. It went from this hopeful treatment facility to basically warehousing people, and that's heartbreaking. Walking through the main entrance today, and yes, you can actually take tours here, which we'll talk about later, you're immediately struck by these soaring ceilings and this incredible architectural detail. The center building housed the administrative offices and the patients who were doing the best, while the wings extended outward on both sides. And here's the really intentional part. The further you walked from the center, the more severe the cases became. This wasn't random. It was part of a whole progressive treatment philosophy that believed in rehabilitation and eventually helping people rejoin society. Let me paint you a picture of what daily life was like here during the better years. Patients had work programs. They'd help in the gardens, work in the kitchens, do laundry, even help with building maintenance. And this wasn't about free labor, although that's definitely how it ended up being used later. Originally, it was therapeutic. The idea was that meaningful work, fresh air, and being part of a community would help people recover. Some patients did genuinely improve and were able to leave. Those success stories are really important to remember. But as we walk through Ward F today, where the most violent patients were housed, you can see how things changed. These heavy doors, the barred windows, the restraint fixtures still visible on the walls. This is tough to see. And I want to be really clear about something. The people who ended up in these wards weren't monsters. They were individuals dealing with mental illnesses that nobody really understood yet, and the treatments available were, well, let's just say medical science has come a long way. The medical treatments used here reflected what doctors genuinely believed would help, but looking back now, some of them are just hard to learn about. Hydrotherapy involved wrapping patients in cold, wet sheets or subjecting them to high-pressure water treatments. Insulin shock therapy deliberately induced comas. Electroshock therapy was done without anesthesia. Can you imagine? And lobotomies were performed by inserting instruments through the eye socket. These weren't acts of cruelty by evil people. These were medical professionals who truly thought they were helping, working with the knowledge they had at the time. Now, let me take you to one of the most emotionally challenging areas, the children's ward. This is where I really had to pause and reflect. Children as young as 6 years old were committed here for what we now recognize as autism, developmental delays, or sometimes just behavioral issues their families couldn't manage. These weren't bad kids. They were children who needed different kinds of support, and this was the only option available to their families. Many of these kids spent their entire lives here, never experiencing childhood outside these walls, never going to a regular school, never having the chance to just be kids. But here's something really beautiful that I want to share with you. Throughout the building, you'll find patient artwork on the walls, and these pieces are absolutely incredible. You'll see portraits of family members they missed, landscapes of places they remembered, abstract works expressing emotions they maybe couldn't put into words. Some patients became genuinely accomplished artists during their time here. One thing that really struck me was this painting of a farm, so detailed, so full of life, created by someone who spent decades inside these walls, but never forgot what freedom looked like. Their creativity and humanity persisted despite everything. The guides here do an amazing job balancing the historical education with respect for everyone who lived here. They'll tell you about the good intentions behind the Kirkbride plan, but they don't shy away from discussing the tragic outcomes that too often resulted. They help you understand how society's attitudes toward mental illness shaped these treatment approaches. And honestly, it makes you think about how we're doing today. Let me tell you about something that really got to me: the cemetery. There are over 600 graves on the asylum grounds, and most of them are marked only with numbers, not names. These weren't people who died from their mental illnesses. Many of them lived long lives here. But they were forgotten by families who either couldn't cope or didn't visit, and they died as numbers instead of the people they were. The Cemetery Restoration Project has been working to identify who these people actually were, returning names to the numbered graves, and that work is so important. The asylum finally closed in 1994 after 140 years of operation, and that marked this huge shift in mental health care. The whole country was moving toward community-based care instead of these massive institutions. And that sounds great in theory, right? But here's the reality. Adequate community resources didn't always exist. Some former patients absolutely thrived with more freedom and less restrictive environments. Others really struggled without the structure and support that institutional life had provided, even with all its flaws. Today, the preserved asylum serves these multiple really important purposes. First, it's an incredible historical education opportunity. You can take historical tours that focus on the architecture, the medical practices, the social history, really comprehensive stuff. They also offer paranormal tours for people interested in that aspect, but I really appreciate that they keep those separate from the historical tours. It's about respecting that this was people's home. The tours run year-round, with different options depending on what you're interested in. The Heritage Tour is about 2 hours and covers the history, architecture, and medical practices. There's a longer 4-hour tour that includes areas not typically accessible. And yes, they do offer overnight paranormal investigations if that's your thing, though those book up months in advance. Prices range from about $15 for basic tours to $85 for the overnight experiences. What I really love about visiting places like this is how they make you think. They challenge us to consider, how will future generations judge how we're handling mental health, homelessness, addiction, and social services today? What are we doing now that seem like a good idea but might look terrible in 50 years? These are important questions, and standing in these empty corridors where thousands of people spent decades of their lives really makes you reflect. Here's my advice if you're planning to visit. First, book your tour in advance, especially if you're going during peak tourism season. Wear comfortable walking shoes because you'll be on your feet for a couple of hours, and the floors aren't always even. Bring a camera if you want photos. It's allowed and even encouraged for historical documentation. But approach this place with respect. Remember that real people lived here, experienced fear and hope and friendship and despair within these walls. The preservation efforts at Trans-Allegheny are really impressive. They're not trying to restore it to look brand new. They're practicing what's called stabilized decay, which means keeping the building safe and weather-tight, while preserving the authentic appearance of age and history. It's a delicate balance, and they're doing it really well. Before we wrap up, I want to talk about what we can learn from places like this. Mental health treatment has come so far. We have medications that actually work, therapy approaches based on real science, and most importantly, we understand that mental illness isn't a moral failing or something to be ashamed of. But we still have work to do. We still have people falling through the cracks, still have inadequate funding for mental health services, still have stigma preventing people from getting help. Supporting mental health causes, advocating for better services, and educating ourselves about mental health issues. These are ways we honor the people who lived in places like Trans-Allegheny. Their stories matter, their experiences teach us, and visiting these preserved sites helps ensure we don't forget the lessons they have to share. So, would I recommend visiting Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum? Absolutely. It's an incredible piece of American history. The tours are professionally done and really educational, and the building itself is architecturally stunning. Just approach it with the respect it deserves as a memorial to real people's lives. In the description below, I've linked to the official tour booking site, some really excellent books about asylum history and mental health treatment evolution, and organizations working on current mental health advocacy. I've also included the safety guidelines we talked about earlier in the week and some background reading that will help you appreciate your visit even more. What aspects of asylum history do you find most important to remember? Have you visited any preserved historical asylums? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And hey, if you're enjoying these deep dive Friday explorations of America's abandoned places, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow we're heading to an absolutely massive abandoned steel mill that helped build America. And I mean literally built the buildings and bridges that define our skyline. Until then, keep exploring with curiosity and respect. This is Peregrine Pathways, reminding you that every abandoned place has a story worth discovering. See you tomorrow for another adventure.